Attorney General Jim Hood received his JD from the University of Mississippi in December 1988. After graduation, he served as a clerk in the Mississippi Supreme Court, as an assistant attorney general for 5 years, and as a district attorney for the 3rd Judicial District for 8 years. He was educated in the public schools of Chickasaw County. He's a fifth-generation Mississippian. He is an avid outdoorsman and a hunter. He and his wife, Debbie, have 3 children, Rebecca, Matthew, and Annabelle. The Attorney General is the chief legal officer and advisor for the state of Mississippi on both legal and criminal matters. His responsibility is to represent public officials and governmental agencies and to issue legal opinions and interpret the state laws. The Attorney General has sole power under Mississippi law to bring and defend lawsuits on behalf of the state. He acts as counsel to state agencies to defend them or bring suit on their behalf. Most importantly, the office is charged with representation of the people of the state of Mississippi. Y'all, let's give the Attorney General a big Boys State welcome.
That must be Hoodville over here. Are y'all the hoodlums? All right. We got a bunch of hoodlums here. Man, that's great. We have a great crowd here. This is a wonderful facility, and I'm glad that Ole Miss has had us here. This is our first time here at Ole Miss, and I remember back when we started down at Wesson at a community college down south of Jackson about probably 13 years ago. I've had the opportunity to speak to Boys State and Girls State for that long. And the reason I do is because this is probably the best organization that I deal with as Attorney General for young people. You know, I was telling the news people out there a minute ago, I very seriously doubt any of the young men in this room will ever go through the criminal justice system, will ever have to deal with that. You'll be productive citizens, you'll be leaders, you'll be elected officials and corporate CEOs and successful people in your community, pastors, serving on the school board, you know, the local boards. All those things in public service are very important. And you already know that. You know a lot more than I did. If I would have known about this organization when I was a young person, which it was in existence, but I just didn't know about it, I would have certainly been here at this organization. And my hat's off to all those staff people and people who give their time and effort. I appreciate what y'all do for these young people. You know, I usually talk about things that affect my office and how it affects you. As you heard a minute ago, I was a DA up here. Oxford was where my DA's office was. It was 7 counties. I'm from down at Houston in Chickasaw County. That's one of the 7 counties in this district, and it went all the way up to Holly Springs and Tippah, Benton, Marshall, Union, Lafayette, Calhoun, and Chickasaw. So this is kind of like home. But some of the things that I do as Attorney General, you know, as DA was a great job. I was able to help people, and when the bad guy went to jail, I was able to hug the victim's neck and get a feeling of reward like money can't buy. You know, of actually helping somebody that day. And that's what people in law enforcement do, and first responders and people that serve our country in the military. They help people every day, and you don't really see that on the news. But as Attorney General, I'm able to affect the lives of a lot more, particularly young people dealing with issues like cybercrime, cyberbullying, issues that occur on the internet. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about today some of the dangers that you face in dealing with the internet, with social media, you know, what's a crime, and how you can get in trouble on the internet. And so I first, talk to you a little bit about cyberbullying. I'm sure none of you guys have ever experienced an incident of cyberbullying, or you wouldn't admit it if you did. But, that happens frequently, and it happens oftentimes to young girls. And so you guys have to be the ones that stand up when some young girl is taking some abuse from one of her friends. I mean, girls can be mean, or some other boy on the internet that's anonymously abusing young women. How many of you have ever heard of Yik Yak? Any of you ever heard of that app? When you go to college, some high schools have that app. It's called Yik Yak. And we had trouble with it. I know at Mississippi State several years ago, we had some high schools where we had trouble with it, but it's sort of within a 5-mile radius. You can get on, and they tell you that you're anonymously communicating with others who are within your area. You know, it's sort of an aerial app. And what we found is that oftentimes young boys would just put up some picture of some young girl and say something nasty about her because she wouldn't go out with them. Well, say something about call her a slut and things like that. No way for her to defend herself. But you know, oftentimes these apps, they'll sell stuff to you saying that you're anonymous. But I have a cybercrime unit in my office. It's law enforcement officers or gun-toting guys who kicked in and girls who kicked in doors and do it every day, usually arresting perverts for child pornography. But they do the same when it comes to students that get involved in that kind of thing of cyberbullying or abusing others or hacking in, not necessarily even hacking into someone's account, but actually stealing someone's password or setting up an account like a Facebook page or an Instagram page and acting as if it was somebody else when it's really you manipulating that. Well, we're able to go into those systems and find out where you are and who you are. And then that's how we come knocking on doors. So don't be fooled by some of the apps that sell you on the fact that it's supposed to be anonymous, because every time they make something anonymous, we in law enforcement have hackers who are able to crack into those systems. And that's how we arrest child pornography people every day. You know what the definition of child pornography is? No. Anybody, boys or girls, a nude photograph and they're under the age of 18. And that is child pornography. And guess what the penalty for that is? Of sending one picture or receiving and having it on your phone. 5-year minimum mandatory sentence, 40 years maximum in the penitentiary, no parole. I mean, that's 5 years day for day. That's really reserved for perverts you see us arresting in the paper about every day. We arrest, 2 or 3 a week. We had a couple up here just last week. Some guy boarded himself he saw our folks coming in and knew what was happening, and he took a gun and locked the door to his bedroom and shot his computer. You know, he thought that would keep us from getting the information from it, but it didn't. We're able to download that type of information. You can erase it off your computer, off the hard drive, and we're able to actually go back and download that hard drive from those images that were on there before. So, we deal with the perverts every day, but just because some girl sends you a picture and she's under the age of 18 and you have it on your phone, then you are committing a felony and she's committing a felony. The fact is we can't prosecute everybody. We can't send everybody to jail, and so it's up to you as people of your age group. It's not up to me, guys with gray hair, to try to fix this situation for you. It's up to you guys as to how you handle it and how you'll handle it in the future. And the thing about technology is that you're the first group you and probably people that are 5 years older than you are the first generation of young people who've had to get caught up in this cyber attack by many children experience it as an attack. But all the things that happen on the internet, it'll be up to you as to how you handle it. So if a young girl sends you, and she's under the age of 18, a nude photograph, you better delete it. Because what happens is if that gets on your phone, or if it's seen, what we have is what's called hashtags. Not a hashtag, a hash value is what is attached to those nude pictures that we know are known photographs. Many of them are kept at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. That's in Washington, and I'm on that board of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So many of these known photographs of children who have been abused, those are actual photographs of kids. And they're not necessarily photographs in child porn arena. They're actually videos of somebody molesting a child. But oftentimes we're able to intercept just pictures that aren't part of that database at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And when we see those, or somebody works on your phone or somebody works on your computer, they have a duty to report that to us and others in school. So I'm just warning you, that's something that can get you in trouble. And what was the penalty? What did I say the penalty on that was? 5-year minimum mandatory, no parole, 40-year max. And so that's pretty much reserved for perverts that are really viewing child pornography. And so those that we're arresting that you read about, Those kids are like prepubescent. They're below the age of 11 or so. And so it's obvious that these people that are viewing child pornography, those are the ones that we're going after. But it's still also, the definition includes those up to the age of 18. So, that's what affects you young gentlemen. There's another area I want, and I'm not going to just browbeat y'all and warn you about this stuff. I'm just telling you what's out there, where you can step in a hole and get in trouble. And I want to talk to you about other things like public service and encourage you to do some of those things in a minute, but I wanted to get out of the way some of the things that you may encounter in college. And another thing that we're seeing is hacking of computer systems and stealing private information like your Social Security number, those kind of things. You'll see that more frequently. You have to better track who has your Social Security number, taking care of your information, changing your passwords. You'll see more hackers hacking into smaller systems. Like in the past, we've seen things like Home Depot and large, which I was a victim of that hack. I had a credit card with Home Depot. I was working on a house in Houston and had to buy some supplies. So everybody can be a victim of these hacks, but we'll see those more frequently in the future. And when people hack into your social networking account and start sending messages to a young girl that are inappropriate, then their father's going to get mad about it. And we've seen cases where some young man didn't actually do it, but some of his so-called buddies actually stole his password and went into his system and started sending nasty stuff out to a girl. And it sounds like a prank, but the problem is it gets you in trouble. It's much more serious when you do things on the internet than in the old days when we had, phones, calling a young girl or talking to them in person. We were much less likely to do it. But if you threaten somebody, face to face, it may just be a misdemeanor. But if you get on that phone or you get on that internet and you send a threat to somebody, then that is a felony. And you're looking at a possible 3-year sentence for felony threat by use of electronic means. So those are some things that can, really get you in trouble, just not really thinking about it. It may be a misdemeanor, which is only punishable by about 6 months. Some of them up to a year, but just a threat, you may be looking at 6 months. But if you get on that phone and use that electronic means to make a threat against somebody, then you're looking at a felony. And a felony does what? It prevents you from voting in a lot of instances, but it also keeps you from having a firearm, getting jobs, and things of that nature. Let me talk to you a minute about privacy. And your generation's going to figure out what you want to do with privacy, what you think you should be able to protect in your own identity and your own information. And I've been in a battle with Google trying to protect people from having their intellectual property theft stolen, musicians, people from, blues musicians from the Delta that write music. They may not perform it, but they don't get paid unless people follow copyright laws. And so there's a large issue out there with Google, but it's also about privacy with Google because they can mine your data, your information to know more about you than, you hear conspiracy theorists often talk about Big Brother being the federal government, the FBI or something. The federal government and the state government could never, in a lifetime, learn as much about you as a company like Google, where they have access to your information. And so, eventually, your generation is going to have to decide whether or not you think they ought to be able to mine the personal information that you have and what you're looking for, what you're searching for, what you're trying to buy, simply because you click I agree when you download an app. That's an issue that I've had a battle in trying to deal with Google, and it's still going on to try to get them to better protect people and young people in particular from selling drugs over the internet and things of that nature. I want to mention a couple of other aspects about cyber data information and things like that, but I'd rather talk to you about what you're seeing, on the internet, what you're dealing with girls and what's happening on social media and what's important to you. So at the end, I'll actually learn from you guys what is on your minds. So dealing with issues like data breach or some of these other issues that deal with technology or things on the internet or just crimes in general, I want you to be prepared to ask questions of me about those technology things, because I know that they're important to you. I want to talk to you a minute, though, about public service. And, I know, a lot of you, like me, when I was at Ole Miss in 1980, when I started here, I was going to go make $1 million, and the last thing I wanted to do was public service. My father had been a county prosecutor, and all it brought was threats, in the middle of the night, and no money in public service. So the last thing I wanted to do was to wind up in public service. But the fact is that you don't necessarily know what the plan that the good Lord has for you. You'll find out in life that God will open doors and close them. Will create opportunities for you. I was going to work in the oil and gas business, and was doing that a couple years after undergraduate. Did it some in undergrad, but the oil business went down. So I decided, well, I'll go back to law school. My father was a practicing attorney for 45 years in Houston. But I was going to go into the oil and gas business. And then I interned in the AG's office after clerking at the Mississippi Supreme Court. And that gave me exposure to law enforcement, and I worked in the drug unit in the AG's office. The last thing I wanted to do in life was to be a prosecutor. I knew the salary was not good, but there was a lot of other problems with being a prosecutor, just, threats on your family and things like that. So that was the last thing I wanted to do. But that's one of those places in life where, I think the good Lord opened the doors and closed them, and I got off in that area, and I've been in it ever since and loved every day of it. But, some of you will, maybe want to run for higher office. Some of you now that are out here, how many of you out here are now running for office in these elections you'll have in a few days? There's a good many of you. And where's all the hoodlums? Where's the hoodlum city? Yeah, we got hoodlums here. All right. Some of you think right now that you're probably going to run for public office in a few years. And you never know. You may not. There again, those doors may open and they may close. And you may be like me. Somebody that never intended to run for public office. And, those doors open and they close. So you have to keep your options open. And some of that entails acting right. And whether it be, on the internet, by putting information out there you shouldn't, sending pictures that you shouldn't, sending pictures of drinking, smoking dope, those kind of things. When you put those pictures out there on the internet, they're there to stay. If you go for a job even at McDonald's, they're checking your Facebook pages. They're checking all that kind of stuff to see what kind of person that you are. And so if you want to go into public service, you're going to have to deal with that as well, those pictures that you made when you were young. And public service is there again, it's not a lot of pay, but you get rewards that you don't get from other things. And that includes people who serve on the school boards and city boards and county supervisors. Those are what make things work. Those boards are the ones that make things work. Then you have other offices that are legislative or statewide level. And those are the ones you see in the paper, and you think that's maybe something you might want to aspire to run for at some point. But really where things get done are usually at the local level of government. I know you've seen many people here talk about statewide offices and who are statewide office holders or congressmen or so forth. But, many of you, maybe you won't go into that kind of thing. But I encourage you, when you do settle into your communities, as I tell you when we started this conversation, was that you're going to end up being leaders in your community. Because I've watched people from Boise State for 13 years now. And I've seen them at, young, like Hiram's son, the little one running around here somewhere. He's certainly going to be a Boise Stater, and he's going to be there you go, there he is down here. He's y'all's mascot. All right. And a lot of you, have worked in campaigns, my past campaigns, a lot of Boise State guys I've gotten to know, Girl State ladies as well. And, I've just seen so many people that go through this program that I see later on they're going to law school or medical school or nursing or some type of MBA program. And so that's where you're going to end up. You're going through programs like this. You're way ahead of the rest of them. You're way ahead of where I was when I was your age. I can tell you that. You understand the significance of this kind of program and being a part of something like this, and you learn a lot from it. So when you do go back in your communities, I encourage you to get involved in public service because it is a rewarding area. So now I've kind of touched on several things, and so normally I like to talk to you about, most of you like to talk about what kind of penalties are available and things like that about crime and things like that. So I'll be glad to try to answer some of those questions. They didn't give any of y'all anything in your breakfast, did they? Did they put something in your eggs, you notice? It was either sleeping or what was that other stuff that y'all put in there, Hiram? What was it? Yeah, saltpeter. I think that's what it is. I think it's got some kind of effect on you guys, a little bit tired, a little bit sleepy. But so if some of you have some questions about some of these issues that I've mentioned, and I'll be glad to try to address them. So I know some of you do, so if you will stand up and say where you're from, that's a normal procedure here. Once a few of you start asking questions, and several of you will, so don't be embarrassed. I usually have fun. I have fun with this because it's always interesting what's on your minds and what kind of technology that you're trying to deal with.
Your name, your high school.
Name and high school.
Name's Grayson Wolf. I attend Northwest Rankin High School. You talked briefly about putting things on the internet, saying things on the internet, threats in particular. Where exactly do you believe we draw the line, between what the First Amendment grants us and what we can say online and the penalties we can receive for what we say online?
Yeah, that's a good question. What he's saying is, where does the First Amendment protection stop, and where does the crime, where's the bright line rule? And so the blue line, as we call it in law oftentimes, is when you make a threat. When you threaten somebody else's health or well-being, then that's when you step over the line and you committed a crime. Our First Amendment gives us tremendous protections, particularly about a public official. You can say just about whatever you want to about a public official, and that doesn't make us always feel good, but you still are protected by the First Amendment, and you can say that about others. Now, just because it's not a crime, though, doesn't mean it's not actionable in a lawsuit. So if you make something up, a civil lawsuit, one's criminal law where you can go to jail, and that's for a threat, but then the other is a civil lawsuit. So if you lie about somebody, then they or their parents can sue you, and later on, when you get to making money, and somebody could take your property from you in a civil action. So you have to be careful what you say about people. Make sure it's truthful if you're going to exercise your First Amendment. Yes, sir.
Anthony from Caledonia High School in Columbus, Mississippi.
Caledonia.
My question is, as far as like security and privacy on the internet, how secure and private would you say VPNs and proxies are?
The question is just about privacy in the internet, and he's talking about where you're plugging into a system. Most of the hacks that we find are actually, like on the financial area, or like plugging in the wall at a bank. That's how they're actually breaking in. It's usually low-tech hacks that occur, so you have to be careful about plugging into different systems and getting spyware. But I think the most dangerous part, rather than plugging into a system, is that when you get phishing email, when you get some email like I got one early this morning, it's about some bank. I knew it was a phishing email because it was some bank that I wasn't even affiliated with. But it either had spyware attached, so I sent it to my office, get my computer people to check it out to see if it had spyware attached, where if you open it, then the spyware gets on your computer, and just, I don't know what the percentage are. It's very high. It's probably likely that over half of us in this room have spyware on our computers. But some of the spyware is where it captures Social Security numbers. So it does. Some of them have those counters that count Social Security numbers, but more importantly, what they're looking for is your credit card numbers. And so they have key counters that count up what your credit card numbers are. They'll send you some, usually it's some email that is loaded with either, it may come from a bank of yours or something, and say, if you don't put in your password now, we're going to close your account. So they created an emergency, and then you put in private information, then they get your password, and they go in and clean out your account. Those are the ones that hit the most of us. And then, there are other damaging spyware. Most of the time, they're just trying to steal your information. Most of the hacks, there again, occur by human error. And so what we do with our systems in our office, and I'm sure Ole Miss does, is that we have hackers come in and try to break into our system. And we do this like quarterly. We'll have some company that's got hackers, and they'll come in, and we'll rotate from one company to the next. And we'll allow them to try to break into our systems. But usually they don't break into your system. They send an email to somebody and fool them. And they will give a password, then they get into your system. And that's usually the way it works on a hack. It's usually more human error than just plugging into a system with a VPN. Yes, sir.
My name is Max Williams from Oxford, Mississippi. And my question is, what is the Attorney General's office doing to represent Mississippians in Washington, D.C. right now?
Yeah. Well, Attorney General is a statewide office. We usually deal with state law as opposed to federal law and dealing with issues that are before the Congress. Some of the time we will issue a joint letter from AGs saying, please don't pass this law, or please pass this law. So we influence some of the laws that are passed, usually by working with the National Association of Attorneys General. I was president of that last year. I've been in office for 13 years as AG, so if you hang around long enough, they make you president of that association. It's one of those kind of deals, But we influence laws and how they're passed. Oftentimes there's litigation on issues that we have to deal with that affect federal law, and so we wind up at the U.S. Supreme Court, and I've had a couple there. One of them, I argued, it was a death penalty case that I tried, and it was from Union County. The guy got the death penalty when I was DA, and as Attorney General, I went there and argued the case and won it 8-0. It was it was affirmed at the United States Supreme Court. So we do some work in the federal courts in Washington, and we do influence Congress to some extent.
Hey, how's it going? My name is J.R. Riojas. I'm from St. Patrick Catholic High School in Biloxi, and I'm actually running for Attorney General. And I was just curious, how often do you actually get to go into the courtroom, and fight for the trials and whatnot?
Yeah, I don't get to go as much as I used to. When I was a district attorney, I tried 101 jury trials. I tried cases about every week. It was fun. When I set out to be a lawyer, that was the last thing I wanted to do, is being in court trying cases. Because I equated it to being kind of, as a lawyer, you go into court, you're kind of acting. I saw, lawyers that I thought when I was in the courtrooms and before, they were putting on a show, and they were kind of bogus. That's the way I took trial lawyers and practicing attorneys in the courtroom. But, I found out really what it amounts to in a trial before a jury. And as DA, I had to show that everything that came out of my mouth wasn't a trick. It was straight up. It was honest. It was, you build a trust with that jury. Of 12 people, they've got to trust the one person in that courtroom is a district attorney. And you have to be able to build that trust. Now, as AG, I know I got to opportunity when I was first elected AG back in 2005. I tried a case in Philadelphia, Mississippi. It was about a civil rights murders. Any of you ever seen the movie Mississippi Burning? It was an old movie back. It was actually came out before I tried that case. But it was about those murders, and that was one of the last few jury trials that I've been able to be engaged in. So as Attorney General, you get to help people. You get to help young people with child pornography and all these other issues of advising government, trying to protect people. I serve as AG based upon my beliefs. And I believe God put us on earth to help one another. And I believe in fighting for those. Thank you. I believe in fighting for those who can't protect themselves. And there's no greater honor for an attorney to be able to use his or her skills to do that. So you running for AG, I hope you'll bear that in mind is you know, large international corporations, they have plenty of money to hire lawyers to fight for them, but regular folks that get run over, you know, because of some consumer protection fraud they commit on working people ain't got time to go fight with some corporation like that. They don't have the money. No lawyer's going to take a little penny ante case like that because they can't make any money off of it. So, you know, a lot of the times the little guy gets run over. And so as AG, I'm able to fight for them, and that's one of the important things. And that's what's rewarding as opposed to hugging a victim's neck when I was DA and the case was over. I don't know if you got the mic. Whoever's got the mic next, speak up. This is a big auditorium, and I can't see very well. Have you got it up there? Okay.
My name is Mikey Farr, and I go to St. Stanislaus High School in Bay St. Louis. And I was wondering, like, in correlation with your last statements, are you for or against tort reform, and why or why not?
On the issue of tort reform, we passed some. What tort reform means is, in Mississippi, about 15 years ago, we had some lawyers who were creatively filing lawsuits in real poor counties and taking advantage of juries. And those were abuses of our court system that, you know, our courts could have corrected, but it took legislation to correct it, and I supported that. Now, there have been some additional tort reforms that cap some things, like some punitive damages. And I know, a friend of mine's a lawyer down in the Delta, and this doctor is a medical doctor, but he was like a genius. He had like a 139 IQ. But my friend got a divorce against his wife. And this doctor, just seething, hated this lawyer and tried to have him killed. He hired a hitman. We got a video of him hiring the hitman. We're going to pay him $25,000, mentions the lawyer's name in the case, got a red bow on it. You know, as a prosecutor, it's a perfect case. But if that lawyer sues this doctor, the most he could get, this doctor's worth about $25 million, I think. When you sue somebody, you get to see their net worth. And it wasn't just a regular doctor, but it was a very wealthy doctor. And the most that lawyer could get, I think, is $2.1 million under these tort reform statute that we have. Now, if somebody tries to kill you and you got a video of it, I think you ought to be able to take every dime that they got. So there are some. There are some good and bad aspects of that, but I think we've got most of the problems cured. All right. Y'all got to go eat lunch?
Right.
Standing between y'all and lunch?
My name is Christopher Knowles. I attend J.Z. George High School, and I have a question regarding the statement that you made about posting pictures of marijuana on social media. And now I see that a lot through our generation, and on social media there are a lot of pictures. So is there a penalty, and if so, what is the penalty for that?
The question is about posting pictures of marijuana on social media. Well, if you've got a picture of it, and it looks like you're actually taking that picture, if some law enforcement officer saw that information, then they would have probable cause to come question you about possession of marijuana. The likelihood of you getting arrested for that, just to be as a practical matter, are not very high unless you're talking on there about selling marijuana or something like that. But what I would be more concerned about is posting that kind of information on your Facebook, and then you go try to get a job, even at any place, and they see that on there. And if it's a manufacturing place, they're absolutely not going to hire you, because they would, if you got hurt or hurt somebody, they would have that information, and they could be held responsible for allowing you to work there in a workplace and cause danger to others. So my best advice is just leave it off. Leave off drinking. I know, you go to, kids go to Florida and they want to, have pictures of them drinking or smoking or whatever they're doing. showing them drunk, that's stupid. Just don't do it because it's going to hurt you. It will come back to haunt you. I assure you, this stuff that gets out there on the internet, it doesn't go away. And people that go out and do searches looking for your background, it's not like you can do a Google search. You know, you can just do a regular, like a Google search for your name or something, and it may not show up. You may think, well, I'm cool, I can do that. But there's something called Accurint. It's a online service that we in law enforcement have. That we can pull up your Social Security numbers, your phone numbers, everything about you. And those services are available to other people out there. So just because you don't see something like a picture of you on Facebook or Instagram sending pictures, you know, of a new girl or drugs or being drunk, or it's just, I guarantee you, the odds of you having that as a problem in the future are very high, particularly if you try to go get into some type of professional degree. So, you know, I would just really be careful because you hadn't, you know, people don't warn you about that kind of stuff. I mean, I know your parents try to tell you a little bit about it, but you don't listen to them, right? You know, my kids didn't listen to me either. But it is a problem out there when you go to get a job or get in a school a lot of the times. I imagine most of the universities do those checks as well. So anyway, if that is the last question, I have thoroughly enjoyed being here with you, and God bless you, and thank you for having me.
We'd like to thank you for coming, Mr. Hood. On behalf of Boise State from the great city of Hood, which is the capital city of Boise State, we would like to present you with this steel tumbler.